connectivity and combined history of its players. Pursuing lives of adventure, warfare, and prosperity, they share this existence in the biggest single shard, free-to-play MMO of all time.
Well, we listened, and here is our answer. The next evolution of the Oyo Gym, Nova. Nova is a full gym in your hands that enables you to work out where you are right now and enjoy the same benefits as weights, without the weight. Powered by our patented Spireflex technology with 10, 20, 30, up to 40 pounds of smooth Spireflex resistance that feels like plate-loaded equipment at the gym. T-handles provide a better grip to control the higher resistance levels and are reinforced with steel tubes. Nova features the same type of nylon-coated stainless steel cables used on health club equipment and the fitness breakthrough no other gym has. Double flex activation, providing resistance to opposing muscle groups within a single movement, building a balanced body in less time. You can expand the range of exercises by anchoring the Nova Gym to your foot or a door. If you have the time for the crowded health club, that's great. But what if you could save time and do those same exercises where you are right now? Chest fly, back fly, bicep, tricep, lat pull down, rows, shoulder press or raise, ab crunch, back extension. Our founder of Oyo Fitness invented Spireflex resistance technology, which powers the Nova Gym. But before Nova, Spireflex was first developed for NASA to keep astronauts in shape on the International Space Station. A NASA 16-week ground study proved Spireflex technology increased muscle hypertrophy, or in plain language, increased muscle size as much as lifting free weights.
When I returned to Earth after using the Spireflex technology almost every day over 6 months, I was physically stronger in every test.
Spireflex technology was recently inducted into the Space Technology Hall of Fame. The Nova Gym with Spireflex technology enables you to fit fitness into your busy life, to get lean and fit anywhere, anytime, home, in the office, or while traveling. Build and sculpt your chest, back, arms, core, and legs. When you join the Oyo Fitness community, you're not just purchasing a workout device. You're joining the Oyo Fitness Club with access to our vast library of workout videos, including the Oyo 10-Week Challenge, in which participants achieved life-changing results. Building on the success of the original Oyo Gym, the Oyo Nova Gym delivers an increased resistance you asked for, and is quite simply the best portable strength training device in the world. The Oyo Fitness team is excited to get the Nova into your hands. We've listened to our backers. We've upgraded our design. Now we ask you to join us and transform your body with Nova.
What are the best smartphones in the world right now? It's a big question, but today we've got some answers. I've got 5 honorable mentions, phones that didn't quite make the top tier, and then 13 phones that I absolutely love. And number 5 in this list of runners-up is the new iPhone SE. To be clear, I like almost everything about it. It's got the build quality and the performance of a $1,000 phone, and it's $399. Even the camera is really quite good. It's just that the battery life isn't. And it's not just a case that battery isn't the strong point of the phone. It's more that, it could actually cause you a bit of a problem. And if you're going to use your phone for 2 to 3 years, it's only going to get worse over that period. So if you're considering the SE, I personally think there's better options, but we'll come to them. Number 4 is a phone that looks pretty unremarkable on paper. You could read through the phone's entire spec sheet and not a single thing would jump out at you as, wow, that's really cool. But the Google Pixel 3a is one of the nicest phones to use for the $300 you can get it at now. Clean Google software with a pretty decent OLED screen. But with this phone, Google has kind of shifted the balance for what they think is important in a phone. Away from really high-end materials, this thing's made of plastic, and away from a screen that fills the entire front of the phone, for this, the camera. I was just messing around with it a few weeks ago, taking photos of my cat, and it's so impressive that I came back wondering if even my $1,400 Galaxy S20 Ultra could have done this. The reason it's only an honorable mention is because this is their mid-range phone from last year, and is soon to be replaced by the Google Pixel 4a, so if you bought it now, you might be a little bummed in a couple of months. But that brings me to the Pixel 4, which is the company's top-end flagship from last year. And it might be a bit of a surprise I'm even mentioning this at all, because when it launched for $800, it was underwhelming, and the whole thing was undercut by poor battery life. If a phone can't get through a full day of usage, then as far as I'm concerned, it could have the coolest features on the planet, it could tie your shoelaces for you, but I can't recommend it. However, in a bit of a surprise turn of events, after a few updates, Pixel 4 battery life improved in my testing. That doesn't happen very often, to be clear. And add to that in most regions you can now get the Pixel 4 for like $499, and I think it's actually quite a viable alternative to the iPhone SE. Number 2 is a bit of a sad story. We're talking a smartphone that has an incredible set of cameras, really good performance, and a market-leading display. This is the Oppo Find X2 Pro, and under different circumstances this could well have been a smartphone of the year. The catch is that it's been pretty much invalidated by the existence of the OnePlus 8 Pro. Barely a month after the Find X2 Pro, OnePlus dropped a phone with almost identical specs, similar design, and a software skin I think most people will prefer, and a much lower price tag. And that turns this Oppo phone into basically a luxury alternative to the OnePlus. This phone has a beautiful vegan leather finish. I want more companies to do this. It feels like a supercar. The cameras, they can zoom further, but from a practical standpoint, I just don't think it's worth the extra money. And then, the final runner-up is also from Oppo, is the Reno 3 Pro. I used this phone for like 2 whole months this year, which is far longer than I usually use mid-range phones. You could think of this as a nearly flagship camera stuck on a mid-range phone's body. I just would have liked to see a higher-end chipset inside of it. Okay, those are the good smartphones, and that leaves us with the best smartphones. And I've categorized them for the different kinds of buyer, with one overall champion at the end. So first of all, if you're anything like me, and you're almost a little bit sick of smartphones overtaking the size of your face, you just want a compact flagship, there are 3 good options. Just as a disclaimer, I say the word compact in a fairly loose sense of the word, because most good phones now are not small phones, but these 3 should be pretty manageable for all hands. So first of all, Galaxy S20, and this is pretty much the compact phone I've been asking for years. It's got the latest everything, fastest chipset, RAM, storage, the camera. This is quintessential Samsung, and the screen is in the top 5 displays on a phone right now. We're talking Quad HD Plus AMOLED 120Hz panel, and the battery's great if you get the Snapdragon version. And that's the one caveat. If you're in a region like the UK or India, where Samsung serves the Exynos version, battery life falls from great to pretty good. Alternatively, iPhone 11 Pro. And I mean, I could sit here comparing the specs and the features, but this really boils down to the question, do you want an iPhone or do you want an Android? If you're open to either, I would say try the Galaxy S20. It's got 5G, and the 120Hz display will make it feel faster. But rest assured, if you go for the iPhone 11 Pro, it's up there too. And finally, the last compact phone is actually the Galaxy S10e. Now, I generally try to stay away from recommending older phones, because they're just going to become outdated faster. But because this category of compact flagship phones doesn't get too much love, this is still one of the better options for now closer to $500. Good camera, great screen, and this just feels like it was made for your palm. Incredibly comfortable to hold. Okay, gaming phones. And to be honest, there's 2 that win by an absolute landslide. The first one is the Red Magic 5G, which is surprisingly affordable and quite possibly the fastest smartphone on the planet. It's also got a 144Hz display. That's the kind of refresh rate you see on high-end PC gaming monitors, and just generally a bucket load of features for gamers. But I've made a more in-depth video about this phone already, so I'll link it somewhere here. So the second of these gaming phones is Xiaomi's Black Shark 3 Pro. Somehow, even more outlandish. We're talking a 7.1-inch Quad HD Plus 90Hz AMOLED display, a phone with a 5000 mAh battery, a 65-watt charger, and dedicated trigger buttons that hide themselves when they're not in use. I remember when I first found out about the existence of this phone, and it took me a grand total of a minute to scrap the video I was currently working on and focus all my efforts on getting this and reviewing it. And I can confirm it's a pleasure to use as well, providing, it fits in your hand. But at this point, I should clarify that technically any of these flagship phones can play games just fine. Buying a gaming phone is for people who are happy to take a bit of a hit in the camera department, for starters, and B, people who play games either competitively or just for long periods of time. Otherwise, you might not even see the benefits at all. You'll just be that person who holds a TV to their ear to make a phone call. I've had a few people ask me, should I save a bit of money and buy an older gaming phone, like let's say the Asus ROG Phone 2? And the answer is probably not. The way I see it, if you want to game seriously on your phone, the number one priority is having the best performance. So if you're picking up a gaming phone from last year that has an older chip, then all of those optimizations you're paying for, like liquid cooling or a physical fan inside, they're a bit redundant. You'd get better performance if you bought just the cheapest current phone with the latest chip, even if it didn't have all those things. But okay, my main problem with gaming phones, the reason I don't use one, is that they tend to sacrifice on photography. But if you did want to take great photos, if for you, your smartphone is just as much about its camera as it is about connecting you with people, then the Huawei P40 Pro is the best photography experience I've had on a phone. As long as you're okay with the fact that there are no Google services pre-built on this phone, if, for example, you're perfectly happy with Huawei's own app gallery, or if you're a bit of a tinkerer and you wanted to try and sideload Google, then this is an awesome bit of hardware with good battery life too. But I mean, you can get good battery life from any of these phones I've put on my top list. But what if you wanted great? What if you wanted to wake up in the morning, download 10 movies, spend the entire day watching them, and then finish that all off with a session of gaming? Well, there's two great options: iPhone 11 Pro Max and Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. Again though, Snapdragon version. They're both seriously expensive and just big phones, but as far as phones with massive batteries are concerned, they're still two of the more balanced offerings. Let me be clear, you can get phones with bigger batteries than these two, but a good smartphone experience is all about balance. What you don't want is a mediocre smartphone with a power bank taped to its back. On the subject of iPhones though, and I thought long and hard about whether or not I should include this, but I decided it's important to have an affordable iPhone category. And this sounds like a pretty strange idea, but here's the thing. If there was one undisputable smartphone king at each price point, my job would be pretty easy. All I'd need to do is to just find out how much someone was willing to pay, and then be like, okay, this is the best phone you can get with that. But people have different preferences, things that for them are base requirements in a phone that they choose. And the one I see the most is, I need it to be an iPhone. I have a lot of people I know personally who don't ask which phone should I buy, they ask which iPhone should I buy, because they want Apple features like FaceTime and iMessage, etc. So if you're in that group and you don't have the budget to buy the absolute top-end iPhone 11 Pro, then you're probably picking between three options: the $399 iPhone SE, the $599 XR, and the $699 iPhone 11. Long story short, I'm gonna make this easy for you. Pick the 11. The SE is probably not gonna cut it battery-wise, and compared to the XR, the 11 is far faster and has a much better camera system. If you're on a budget just generally, and you don't need an iPhone, then I would say Realme 6. For those of you who don't know, Realme is yet another subsidiary of BBK Electronics, like Oppo, like Vivo, like OnePlus. But the difference is that Realme is new, and because it's new, the company's trying to make a name for itself, and to do that, they're pricing their phones at a staggeringly affordable price. So for around $250, this one has, first of all, a quad camera setup that would sit fine on a $400 phone, a 1080p display which somehow also has a 90Hz refresh rate, an upper mid-range chipset specializing in gaming, and great battery life. Don't get me wrong, you'll know when you're using it that it's not a top-level flagship, but for this price, it's not even close. Realme 6 is up there. There's also the Poco X2, really just nice phone, and again, for a budget-friendly price. We're talking 120Hz display, we're talking 4500 mAh battery. It's just that you'll struggle to buy this phone outside of India, so I haven't officially added it to the list. Okay, before the overall winner, let's talk about the best all-rounder phones. Phones that don't necessarily specialize in one thing, but ones that do everything well. And there's a few here. I already mentioned the iPhone 11 Pro and Galaxy S20 Ultra. These two, they nail the fundamental pillars of what makes a good smartphone. But there's three more. Galaxy S20 Plus. which is really similar to the Ultra in the things that matter, but just slightly smaller, a bit more manageable, and more affordable. And to be honest, even though, yeah, the 64 megapixel main camera there should be less capable than the 108 megapixel one on the Ultra, in practice, it's not, really. There are cases where the Ultra looks better, but there are plenty of cases where the normal S20 and S20 Plus look better, but the fact that they trade blows is telling. We then got Xiaomi's Mi 10 Pro, and as far as I'm aware, this is the most expensive mainstream phone they've ever made. And for some context, the Mi 9 Pro last year was like $600. This is $1,000, but for that you get pretty much just insane specs across the board. So to give you an idea, you've got Snapdragon 865, 108 megapixel quad camera setup, you've got a 4500 mAh battery with an insane 65 watt charger included in the box, 5G, dual speakers, everything. Plus, it's all wrapped in something I really appreciate on phones, a soft touch matte finish. It does miss out on an official IP rating, which is kind of confusing considering the massive price hike over last generation, but I don't think that alone should stop you considering this phone. And then finally in this category is OnePlus 8 Pro. And apart from having a headphone jack, this is 100% an everything phone. Every feature that you think a 2020 flagship should have, this probably does. And it does so cheaper than its competitors. You could put it side by side with the S20 Ultra as an example, and some people might actually say they prefer the OnePlus, even though it's $400 less. But it's not the ultimate value king. And people have also asked me about the Galaxy Note 10 Plus from last year as a potential current best all-rounder. But personally, I would err on the side of caution with that one. I just think the cameras and the power of the S20 lineup, they've come a long way, but the Note 10 Plus still isn't old enough to be cheap either. Okay, that leaves me with my current smartphone of the year. And just before I get to that, there's a couple of phones that I've been seeing online that look really interesting that I haven't managed to test yet. There's the Xperia 1 II, which is this super widescreen cinematography focused phone, and it supposedly uses technology from the company's own Alpha DSLR cameras. I think this is an awesome concept, but just bear in mind it doesn't mean it's going to be great. Just take the Red Hydrogen 1 as an example. There's this funky new LG Velvet smartphone, which kind of makes it seem like LG has gone right back to the drawing board in terms of design. I'd say it looks decent. I think it's meant to be inspired by water drops, but what's confusing to me is that this would have been a perfect chance to start using a hole punch camera for the front, as opposed to this kind of ugly looking notch. And then finally is Motorola's Edge Plus, which is yet another $1,000 flagship phone, but one that looks like it has very little missing. It's even got a 5000 mAh battery and a headphone jack. So if the software's good, this could actually be top level. And now, my overall smartphone value champion is a phone that I was expecting to be impressed by, and I was. It's the OnePlus 8, but with one important asterisk, which I'll come to. The phone has OnePlus's typical caveats. It loses wireless charging and an official water resistance rating, but the important thing is that using it feels indistinguishable from the very best phones out there. Top level chipset, top level display. This is the most comfortable phone I've held in a long time. It feels just as premium as the $1,000 Huawei P40 Pro and Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro, but actually has sleeker, less bloated software than both of those offerings. The one area you'll be reminded that you didn't just sink $1,000 into your phone is the camera, where OnePlus has basically reused the sensors from last year's flagships. I was initially kind of annoyed by this, but I mean, look at the iPhone SE, that uses a camera sensor from 3 years ago, just with improved software. And it's a similar story here. The camera won't blow you away, but it's actually quite good. The asterisk. The important thing to bear in mind here is that with OnePlus phones in particular, pricing varies massively by region, to the point where I don't think it's even fair for me to say that the OnePlus 8 is the best value regardless of where you are. Let me give you an example. In the US, OnePlus 8 is the exact same price as the iPhone 11, but here in the UK, it's the equivalent of $130 cheaper. And if you go to India, it is literally $300 cheaper. So while in the US, you could look at both of these phones and think, okay, I've got a slight preference for iOS, I'm going to pick the iPhone. That makes much less sense in the UK, and it makes much less sense if you're in India, where I think the OnePlus delivers unquestionably higher value. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing, that would be incredible. With that being said, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.
The Xiaomi Mi 10 and Mi 10 Pro look very similar, with screens that curve at the edges and that are broken up by punch-hole cutout cameras in the top left of the display. On the back there is a camera bump in the top left corner. These phones have a 6.67-inch OLED screen with HDR10 Plus support and a screen refresh rate of 90Hz to make content and motion look a bit smoother. The Xiaomi Mi 10 and Mi 10 Pro both run on the top-end Snapdragon 865 chipset paired with 12GB of RAM and 512GB of storage options. That chipset has an adjacent 5G modem. One of the most important features of the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro is the 108MP main camera, which takes fantastic pictures and supports 8K video recording like the Samsung Galaxy S20 series. The Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro has a 20MP ultra-wide camera and 2 telephoto lenses. One of these is 8MP and supports 10x hybrid zoom, and the other is 12MP with 2x optical zoom, which is used for portrait mode. Pictures taken with the phone looks great and delivers great dynamic range and color accuracy. It also have a 20MP front-facing camera, which is a pretty decent resolution for selfie snapper. It comes with 4500mAh battery capacity. This phone has a 50W fast charging, 30W wireless charging and 10W reverse wireless charging, which lets you use the device as a wireless power mat for other devices. Xiaomi has a reputation for producing quality phones at affordable prices, and Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro 5G is another example of that. The Sony Xperia 1 Mark II comes with a 6.5-inch display that has a 4K resolution. It's a HDR OLED panel. However, the company has included a new feature that will allow for a 90Hz effect on the screen, but it doesn't seem to use an actual 90Hz panel. Sony's latest flagship phone features a 3.5mm headphone jack on the top edge. The design is glass on the front and back, both of which are protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 6 technology. Inside the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II, there is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset, which is one of the very best processors on the market. The phone comes with 8GB of RAM to keep it running. Storage-wise, you have got 256GB of space to play with here, and that's expandable with a microSD card. 5G is one of the big talking points of Xperia 1 Mark II. There's no 4G only variant of this phone. The camera is another area Sony's put a spotlight on. The camera includes a 12MP main sensor, a 12MP telephoto one with 3x optical zoom, and a 12MP ultra-wide sensor, alongside a 3D time-of-flight sensor that will offer groundbreaking autofocus technology. It's using a technology that Sony developed for its alpha range of cameras, and the aim here is to give you the best shot through stronger autofocus. This technology can completely autofocus and auto-exposure calculations at 60 frames per second, while the camera itself can take 20 shots in burst mode each second. But Sony claims it improves autofocus for low light conditions as well as in everyday shooting. The phone can also record video in 4K HDR at up to 60 FPS. Pictures are amazing with this camera with its stunning dynamic range and color accuracy. On the front of the phone, there's an 8MP selfie camera, and Sony announced they have made significant improvements for front-facing shots. Sony has also made some big improvements to the battery on this device by increasing it to 4000mAh on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II, up from 3330mAh on the Xperia 1. OnePlus has added the best display it's ever made on the 8 Pro, and the Chinese company says it's the best screen you will see on a phone for 2020. It is a 6.78-inch fluid display with a 120Hz refresh rate, HDR10 Plus support and QHD resolution. The OnePlus 8 Pro features a circular punch-hole camera cutout in the top left corner of the screen. The OnePlus 8 Pro is the first handset from the brand to carry an official IP rating, which means it's officially protected against dust and water. The phone features Qualcomm's top-of-the-line Snapdragon 865 chipset, which comes with Qualcomm's X55 5G modem to enable super-fast internet speeds where 5G is available. The OnePlus 8 Pro packs 4 rear cameras, including a 48MP main camera with an 1.78 aperture. There's also a 8MP telephoto camera with a 3x optical zoom and ultra-wide 48MP camera with a 119-degree field of view and a dedicated 5MP color filter camera that lets you apply artistic filters as you are shooting. The OnePlus 8 Pro's main 48MP camera and wide-angle shooter take sharp and vibrant shots, especially in outdoor lighting. The dynamic range and color accuracy is great. In addition to that, the camera's 3x lossless zoom can take pictures without losing detail. It can also digitally zoom up to 30x, but the photo quality really degrades at this level. The camera can also shoot 4K video and has optical image stabilization. On the front, there is a single 16-megapixel selfie camera which delivers stunning quality. Overall, the OnePlus 8 Pro cameras are a big improvement over the camera setups found on the 7 Pro and 7T Pro. The OnePlus 8 Pro comes with a sizable 4510 mAh battery, which is the biggest OnePlus has ever put in a handset. The OnePlus 8 Pro could comfortably last a day on a single charge with typical uses including gaming, video playback, social media, messaging, video calls and photography. The P40 Pro features a quad curve overflow display with curved glass at all four edges. There are still very thin bezels at the top and bottom. The 6.58-inch screen on the Huawei P40 Pro has a resolution of 1200 by 2640. Huawei has increased the refresh rate of the screen to 90Hz, which is faster than the 60Hz of its previous phones, but not quite as fast as competing handsets like the S20 and Oppo Find X2 Pro that offer a 120Hz display. The Huawei P40 Pro is powered by the same Kirin 990 5G chipset that we have seen in the Mate 30 Pro 5G and Huawei's folding phone, the Mate XS. This is based on 7nm manufacturing technology and is plenty fast enough to keep up with the latest flagship phones. The processor is teamed up with 8GB of RAM and also currently the only high-end chipset with integrated 5G, meaning it will work well with the dedicated 5G networks of the future as well as with the current hybrid LTE/5G networks. If there's one thing that has made Huawei's P-series phones stand out from the crowd, it's the camera tech. The P20 and P30 handsets raised the bar when it came to the mobile photography, and Huawei is looking to raise it higher again with the P40 Pro. On the rear section, the Leica branded camera setup composed of a 50-megapixel primary and 40-megapixel ultra-wide cameras and a 12-megapixel telephoto camera that's capable of 5x optical zoom or 50x digital zoom. There's also a time-of-flight sensor for creating bokeh effect in portrait mode shots. With the P40 series, Huawei is debuting its XD Fusion engine, which uses AI to optimize your photos. Huawei was one of the first manufacturers to get on board with AI, and the results on the P40 Pro are impressive. The phone can remove friends from a picture and even reflections that appear when you are trying to photograph anything that's behind a glass. The P40 Pro also features impressive zooming capabilities, and Huawei isn't shy talking about that. Low-light photography has been a strong point for Huawei, and the P40 Pro doesn't disappoint on that front. The P40 Pro's rear camera layout is capable of shooting Ultra HD 4K video at up to 60 frames per second, as well as super slow motion at up to an eye-watering 7680 fps. Both modes are available on the ultra-wide and wide cameras. Up front is a 32-megapixel selfie shooter backed up by laser-guided autofocus. The 32-megapixel selfie shooter is able to capture lots of detail and color in almost all lighting conditions. The Huawei P40 Pro is equipped with a 4200 mAh battery, which should last you a full day of moderate to heavy uses. It supports 40-watt fast wired charging as well as wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. The Galaxy S20 Ultra is Samsung's biggest Android phone, and it lives up to its name. It is the first Samsung phone with a 120Hz display. Samsung's 6.9-inch display will push the boundaries of your finger's reach, but it won't feel much bigger than the S10 Plus. It's just that the Galaxy S20 Ultra is noticeably taller, not wider, expanding to a 20:9 aspect ratio. The Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra is made of glass and aluminium, and it is protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 6. The specs of this smartphone rival the likes of laptops, meaning it's more than you will ever need. The internal specs are all top of the line: a 7nm chipset, Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 in the US or Samsung's Exynos 990 in the UK and Europe, 16GB of RAM, 512GB of internal storage, and a microSD card slot for expandable storage. The S20 Ultra has a 108MP 1.8 aperture main camera, a 48MP 3.5 aperture telephoto camera, and a 12MP 2.2 aperture ultra-wide camera. There's also a time-of-flight depth camera on the back, aiding portrait photos and 3D scans, and a 40MP selfie camera on the front. It's Samsung's biggest camera sensor upgrade since the Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge. The main 108MP camera delivers great quality pictures.